So the hottest topic right now in business, in particular, is AI, and all the benefits and all the uses of AI. We have. I'm on a chat stream with other entrepreneurs, and we're talking about what are the best AI tools, and we have all that, and yet there's some downsides to AI. There are deep fakes out there. There are people truly stealing and scamming people because of AI. And so we decided at the WealthAbility Show to bring on an expert in this area, David Moschella. Welcome, David. And it's good to have somebody who can actually talk about, okay, what should we be aware of, and how do we deal with those things that are real, even while we're using all of the great things that come out of the AI technology.
Great.
So if you could, David, just give us a little of your background, because you've got a pretty impressive background when it comes to the software industry and AI.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And yeah, I sort of grew up with the computer industry and consider myself someone who's really studied the evolution of the business, and particularly the global competitiveness of technology over time. So the mainframe era, the mini computer era, the personal computer era, the mobile phone era, the internet era, and now the AI era. And so I see the whole AI thing primarily as the next great phase of evolution of the business. And at every one of those phases, there have been issues and challenges all around the world. But if you look at them all, they've all tend to have a great many more benefits than downsides. And I strongly believe that'll be the case with AI as well.
Well, we all hope so, because I think it's coming whether we want it or not, right? Change is coming. Change is coming whether we want it or not. So, of course, the entrepreneur's job is to figure out, how do I make that change work? And how do I actually adapt to it? And it's tough because it's changing so fast. For example, so I want to talk about this issue that we have going on right now with deep fakes, where you have people literally pretending to be somebody else, or have AI pretending to be somebody else. And it's really hard to tell. And I'd say within a year, you won't be able to tell it all. I'll give you an example. So I saw a great technology the other day. A friend of mine played it for us at a mastermind group I was in, and he actually had an AI call. It was an appointment setter for him. The AI person was calling and setting appointments with potential candidates. And with the exception of just a little bit of hesitation, which I presume is going to go away quickly, you could not tell. Nobody in that group could tell that was AI, except for things that we were listening for it, right? But it was clear that the candidate could not tell. He had no idea he was not talking to a real person with a British accent.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a great tool, right? It means that I don't have to have, potentially, I don't have to have 20 salespeople on my staff. I can have one sales manager, and all of those calls can be done by an AI tool. All I have to do is set up the script. One of the great things, of course, is AI doesn't go off script, which is awesome, because salespeople always go off script. So you don't have those weaknesses. Of course, you don't have some of the adaptability, quite frankly, of that creative adaptability of the individual, of the human being. But at the same time, it's so good that you go, okay, so now we're seeing scammers that are calling people, and it sounds like they're the real person. It could be Donald Trump calling you to ask for your vote, and it sounds just like Donald Trump. Or it could be Tom Wheelwright calling you to say, hey, we could reduce your taxes, and it's going to somebody completely different than Tom Wheelwright. So how do you see? I'm sure you see that issue. It's a sizable issue right now. We've heard about it with teenage girls who people are posting deep fake naked photos of them, right? And they can't tell, right? You can't tell it's not, and it's causing really serious harm to these girls. So how do you think that's going to play out? How do you think that's going to get resolved?
Yeah, of all the many fears that are said about AI today, surveillance and joblessness and all these things, deepfakes is the most real right now by far. But when listening to what you said there was two aspects. One was a positive, that you might want lots of automated sales agents to expand your business. And there's a lot to be said for that if you can pull it off. And of course, then the downsides of various scams. But the first thing I'd say is, for the entire history of the internet, scams have been a big problem, and still are, from the old internet, ransomware, malware, and all of these things. So they will be scams. And the question is, how big a impact that'll be overall. And I'll give you one example. People thought that deepfakes would be an enormous factor in the coming presidential election, but they by and large haven't. Because first of all, people are catching on. And so if you see something that, Biden saying this or Trump saying that, there's a certain, skepticism that's already building, and that's a good thing. And the media organizations themselves have a real interest in being on top of that. And it can lead to various new forms of trusted sources, but it's a real issue. The other thing I would say is that the law can respond, because people often talk about making laws to regulate AI, and that's a big, broad, difficult topic. But to write laws focusing on deep fakes isn't so hard. You say, hey, you're impersonating someone else. Well, that's related to our fraud laws or identity theft laws or some sort of slander. And so the criminalization of that can be quite severe. And that, then it starts looking a bit more like a lot of the other scams that are out there. So
do you think
it's a real issue, but I think there's mechanisms to at least mitigate it.
Do you think we'll see tools? I hope we'll see tools quickly that will be AI tools to identify those.
Yeah, people are very optimistic about that.
I understand that, one of the big issues, of course, one of the first issues that came out with ChatGPT was students writing their papers using ChatGPT. And frankly, I've seen some writing come out of ChatGPT that was better than most people I know who they can't write that well. So it's better written. But I understand that the professors, there was somebody got pretty smart pretty quickly and developed a program where the professors can actually run it through the AI program, and it can detect whether it's AI or whether it's a human being.
It can do that, as well as detect whether it's just copied from any other source. iAuthenticate and other sorts of products that can detect that. The plagiarism one, to me, is a good example. It's got an enormous amount of headlines, but it's actually, I think, as you say, you can now detect it with technology, but also the simplest solution to that is simply to have students take their tests in a room, in a closed room where they don't have access to all that stuff. And so, the plagiarism one, I would go as far as say there'll be less plagiarism in the future, because it's so much easier to detect. So much
easier to detect.
And harder to get away. And people are very aware, and the punishments will be severe. But the point I agree with you on, and over the years, I've hired a lot of researchers and writers, and ChatGPT writes way better than most of them.
It's sad. Now, I'm in the accounting industry, and let me tell you, ChatGPT writes better than 99.9%.
It writes beautifully. It's often wrong, but it writes beautifully.
It writes beautifully. Exactly. It's often wrong, but it won't. But over time, it won't be wrong, right? It's getting better and better. You look at a program like Perplexity, which I love, because I can get deeper and deeper, and it actually goes to the actual sources, which is awesome for those of us who love sources and like reading the original material. And I see it just getting so much better all the time. And it is machine learning, right? And machines learn really quickly.
Yeah, there's no question. And, AI has been around a long time. So-called machine learning, deep learning really didn't take off till about 2016 with the chess and Go use. So it's really only about 8 years old. And the next 4 or 5 years are going to, it's on a still exponential improvement curve. No doubt.
It is. So I have a question for you on that, though. So I see the difference between, say, my generation, I'm baby boomer, and my grandkids. Okay. They're like technology is second nature to them. It's an extension of them. They don't have to think about it. It's like once you learn a language and you really learn it, when I was younger, I lived in France, in Paris, and I became completely fluent in French. So I could think, I thought in French, I could speak, it was no big deal. They're like that with technology. On the other hand, the machine learning is so much faster than human learning. How will people keep up? So for example, let's take our sales example there. Okay, so let's start with the appointment setters. He was explaining that his appointment setters, typically their goal was to make 5,000 calls a day. With the AI can make them in a minute, those 5,000 calls. So first thing that's going to do is it's going to displace all those appointment centers. So, but basically what he did was he let 30 appointment setters go and just kept his best, because there are some people are so good that their creativity is going to outweigh the speed of
people hate robocalls.
They're just going to be that much better.
Yeah.
But you've got 30 people displaced. Well, 30 times thousands means you're going to have a lot of people displaced in the short run. And of course, we've had that happen in the past. I remember you read about the Luddites back in the turn of the 19th century, right? And they wanted to destroy the machines because the machines were taking the loomers' jobs. And so, and so technology happens. It's going to happen. The question is, and it was a temporary, right? And then they got reskilled and they did something else. How fast can we get reskilled though? Because does there come a point where we cannot keep up and then we become a world of consumers and there's just a few that are running everything?
Yeah, I mean, I never talk about never and how long, 50, 100 years, but all I can say is we're nowhere near any of that in the timeframes we're looking at. That, our problem in the world today is worker shortages.
Right. It's true.
People can't find people to do things. We have aging societies. We have all kinds of unmet needs in healthcare and care for the elderly and education and cleaning up the environment and transforming to different ways of growing food and providing energy. All this work needs to be done, and less workers. So to me, that whole line of automation and jobs has always been wrong in the past. And so, as you say, it's been wrong for 200 years with the Luddites. And I think it's totally wrong right now. That I don't think there's any way we could meet the needs of Western aging societies without major advances in automation. And how else are you going to do that other than with technology and almost certainly with AI? So I think of all the fears, I think deepfakes is the most legit, and job losses might be the least legit.
Interesting.
It's not the world we live in.
Well, so of course, my profession, I'm a CPA and run a franchise of CPA firms. We have a huge exit of CPAs, particularly since pandemic. The pandemic accelerated retirement. I was reading an article the other day that only 45% of people think that they will work past age 62. Yeah. That's that's down 10%. That's down from 55% just a few years ago.
And people live to 80,
Right. Yeah. You see a lot of people are passing away right now that you and I grew up with because they were the performance center, and they're dying in their 80s and they were still performing in their 80s. Right. But with AI, will they be performing, or will you have a deep fake Tom Hanks, which he talked about doing that? He wanted to do it. Tom Hanks has actually talked about it as a positive. Hey, look, I could be acting for eternity. And he could. I mean, it's, you watch some of the shows on Netflix, et cetera, and I look at some of the technology. I'm going, that looks so real. I cannot discern that that's not real. They're not really on a ship in the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely.
With those waves. I mean, it is so realistic. And so, my point is, I do see this. I mean, for the accounting profession, frankly, technology will rescue our profession. Our profession is in deep trouble without technology. And I think that technology is going to be a savior to our
and it's
profession.
the same in most professions, the medical profession, the healthcare, the education profession, and the scientific, almost every field suffers from burnout, information overload, early retirements, lost knowledge from the past. All those things
How do you
are
think we'll
generic
deal with that?
patterns.
How do you think we'll deal with that economically? I mean, are we destined for, for the government paying people not to work?
I don't think, in America, these problems are far less severe than in other places because we have very high levels of immigration. And so the American population is still actually growing. But if you look at Japan,
right,
Japan's population peaked at about 120 million. It's forecasted to go down to about 70 million over 20, 30, 40 years because people aren't having any kids and they don't have any immigration. And so if you talk to a Japan futurist, their whole strategy is AI, robots, machine help, automation, because that's the only way they can meet the needs of what they're going to have to do. And that's true in South Korea. It's becoming true in China. Many parts of the world, particularly in Asia, are going to have this aging and declining populations. And then you have places like India where the population continues to explode. But so America, in this sense, may not be the lead indicator of how that all plays out because the need is less here. If we didn't have all the immigration to do all the work we had, think about what would go on.
So you don't think technology will overtake?
Well, what do you mean by overtake? I mean,
well, okay. So right now, I mean, clearly, well, we say we have low employment, but what we really have is high partial employment. I mean, we don't have, there are a lot of underemployed people. That's very, very clear that a large portion of that employment number is people that are truly what we would call underemployed. Honestly, I think most people who work from home are underemployed.
Yeah.
And so you have that, but at some point, does that catch up where technology does so much? I mean, like my example with appointment setters, you replace 30 appointment setters out of 36. Mm-hmm. Okay. You do that with the salespeople. Cause I actually asked my friend, I said, so what about sales calls? He says, that's next. That's what we're doing next. Or, you look at even in the medical profession where a computer can read a chart more accurately than a physician, right?
They can. And in just about every field you look at, the combination of a machine and a human is superior to either on their own, the so-called cobot.
Agreed, but the proportion, but it would seem like because it's so fast, and this is, my concern is not long run, my concern is short run. Yeah. In the short run, it would seem that the displacement would be potentially serious. My question is, how will it, from an economic standpoint, if people are underemployed, right? How are they going to get by? How they've been able to get by because they've gotten transfer payments, right? More people on food stamps, et cetera. That's how they've gotten by. Will that just continue and accelerate in the future? Is it like Bill Gates said that we're going to have uniform basic income?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but to me, a lot of that underemployment, not fully using what we have, so much of that comes down to a lack of competitiveness. That the fact we don't make anything here anymore is a source of the decline of those high wage jobs. That just about every product that we all rely on is made mostly somewhere in Asia, often China or in the advanced parts of Germany or wherever. But the decline in manufacturing in America, to me, tells you more about the sort of weak and sort of half jobs that this country is full of now than any impact of technology. And it's easy to think that AI change will happen fast because AI itself will evolve fast, but that doesn't mean the economy is going to evolve all that fast. The internet was around initially in the 70s and 80s and didn't do anything. It became public in the mid 90s. And so now 30 years later, it's done a lot, but it hasn't transformed most industries. It's transformed the way you sell and communicate and things. But our basic core industries and jobs, they're all recognizable from what was there of airplanes and cars and hotels and houses and food. And so I think there's more continuity than people think. And automating, and just one last thing, automating the physical world is fundamentally much harder than automating the information world. It's one thing for AI to do sales and calls. It's another thing for it to come and fix your plumbing and build a house or repair a road and all these things, clean up the oceans, all these things that need to be done in the physical world. To me, those are more about robots than AI precisely. So you sort of need both. And that's a whole other scenario as to when those two might come together. But to address the physical world, you need a physical entity of some sort. And that's just not just software and data.
Interesting. So it almost, what I'm hearing from you, you tell me if I've got this, is what I'm hearing is that because we are humans, we will actually slow it down. Because if we can't keep up, we will actually, there are things that we will just not accelerate.
Yeah, there's tremendous inertia in everybody's life and in the economy and rigidities. And how much is really, the pandemic changed a lot, but then we sort of revert to sort of the way it was. And I don't know. I think people often overestimate the rate of change in society overall. And one of the things they do in the book is America changed far more in the 20s, 30s, and 40s than it has the last 30 years. In the 20s, 30s, and 40s, you had hot, clean running water and sewage and electricity and telephones and radios and cars and planes and all these things, the appliances and all these things that didn't exist. And for almost every air conditioners, things that have far more impact on most people's lives than analytics and better information and software, as much as I like all of those things. And so, in the 19th century, half of Americans were farmers. Today, it's 2%, or something like that. So we've lived through bigger, faster changes consistently than the last 30 or 40 years. And who knows about the next 30 or 40? I would never put myself out there to talk about that. But I think you can talk about 5 and 6 and 7 year periods, because those technologies are actually here now. And you can sort of, as people often say, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I think that's true.
And just so everyone knows, that the book Dave is talking about is Technology Fears and Scapegoats. And I like the subtitle, 40 Myths About Privacy, Jobs, AI, and Today's Innovation Economy. I want to turn to a different technology, because AI, a technology that everybody was talking about, and then AI came and now nobody's talking about, and that's blockchain. Blockchain's near and dear to my heart, because blockchain essentially solves the accuracy problem. I describe blockchain as triple entry accounting.
Yeah,
that's the way I describe it.
Yeah.
How do you see blockchain working with AI and other technologies? Because to me, it seems like, and this goes to the deepfakes, right? So the reason what blockchain does, it tells us where does it originate? Who actually originated that? Could we not use blockchain to deal with the deepfakes to begin with? And because we would have the origin, we'd be able to prove origin. And is there a way to actually display that to the public? Because, it's one thing we know it, and it's one thing to go after it with laws like you were talking about, but it's a whole nother thing to actually let the public know and say, here, public, this is how you can know that this is, for example, you'll see people on X that have the real so-and-so, right? This is not the fake so-and-so, this is the real so-and-so, and they get it. And then blockchain theoretically could prove that. How do you see those working together?
Yeah, there's all sorts of verification schemes like that. In fact, even Trump's Twitter, when he at least used to be the real Donald Trump, and I think still is. But yeah, blockchain's a funny thing, because on the one hand, if you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, people have made fantastic fortunes on that and all the things that explain why. But in terms of that wider vision that you're talking about of a shared ledger, supply chains and sort of triple entry accounting and all that. You're closer to it probably than me, but to me, that seems like it's been a failure. That you don't see many people doing it.
We have not seen it. It's been so hard to the issue has been the programming of it, right?
Yeah,
and the political push against it. I mean, take for example, to me, the most obvious use of blockchain would be to eliminate the need for title companies and title insurance.
That was one of the original.
To me, that would be obvious, but the title companies have a lot of reason to not want it. And so it's the same reason. I mean, why are we just now getting electric cars when I remember in the 1980s, Ford had an electric truck. In the 1980s, Ford had an electric truck.
Yeah, electric truck. They had electric cars in the 20s and 10s.
Yeah. So why, why did it take so long? Well, a lot of that was because Detroit didn't want them, right? Or so there is a lot of pushback there. What do you think it's going to take to kind of free that up? I mean, it's got to be an economic reason for it.
I mean, I look at that whole blockchain boom. Well, it's now more than 10 years. People have had that vision.
Yep.
There was 1 million pilot projects. Virtually all of them have been shut down as far as I know. And I think it was less about the inertia, obviously some of that, but I think a lot of it was, hey, these are really hard to set up. They're complicated and the return just isn't enough. We've got better use of our top tech people because you need really talented people to do that work, and the return just didn't justify it. Whereas if you went into the Bitcoin world, well, then you get the return, and that part of the world has been spectacularly successful, at least for now, and who knows how that plays out. And so I don't know. I spend a fair amount of time in tech circles. I don't even hear people talking about those shared ledger blockchains much at all anymore.
That's really interesting. So let's kind of turn to some of the creators of AI, the leaders in AI, whether it's Sam Altman or Elon Musk or Bill Gates, and how do they see it? Some of them, like Elon Musk, is very concerned about AI as an existential threat and regulating AI. Kind of what's your view on that, and what is your view on their view? Are they saying it, or are they believing it?
It's one of the great questions. And you look at Musk, and he said all those warnings, how there won't be any jobs and tech will do everything for us, and we should regulate and slow down. And yet he's going full speed ahead.
Yeah,
AI and robots and brain implants and anything he can do to build up his empire. So I look at what they say, and then so I look at what they do. And the same with Sam Altman. I mean, he said famously some really, it's like the atomic bomb. We need to stop and control this before it proliferates. And he hasn't slowed down one thing that he's actually doing in his company. So, they all realize that it really isn't even our choice, that America could get out of AI, and then the Chinese and Indians
of course,
could do AI. So
you can't stop it.
Yeah, you cannot stop it. And the genie's out of the bottle. And to me, you shouldn't stop it. That there are so many benefits to this thing. And whatever risks come, you gotta have some faith that we'll be able to deal with them, that we've dealt with tech risks for many, many years. And so the Musk one is the most surprising to me, because no one has done more for technology, arguably ever, than him. Between the Teslas and the Starlinks and the SpaceX and his AI and his brain links and Solar City and God knows what else he has set up. He's arguably the greatest tech industrialist like in history, and yet he says this thing, but it doesn't change what he does. And I wonder, but I think in his case, he's talking about robots, because his whole thing is colonies in Mars and all that stuff. And you're going to need robots to do that. And that's what he's building. And one of the big things he's going through now is, do I use my special technologies in Tesla, or do I use them in my robot business? Where do I use them in my AI? Where do I use my good stuff? And what am I really trying to do here? And so, to me, it's less about pure AI than the combined AI robot that starts getting really interesting.
Interesting. So what are 2 or 3 things that a business owner, entrepreneur could do actually to take advantage of it, so that to stay ahead and to actually keep up, because it's, I mean, for some of us, it's seems overwhelming.
Yeah.
There's so much out there. What are 2 or 3 ideas or recommendations you've got?
Yeah. The first thing is, every generation of new tech, particularly the recent ones, have really helped entrepreneurs. You look at the most recent, cloud computing, that you didn't have to own your own computers and your data centers and your tech management staffs. You could just sign up and use an Amazon or Microsoft. And before that, the ability to have just personal computers rather than have all your work done by outside accounting firms and people like yourself. So that every generation of technology is helped small businesses automate and manage their work far more cheaply. And I assume AI will do that extremely well. And so in that sense, it makes it easier and cheaper to run a small business. So that's sort of the back office side. On the front office side, obviously people are starting AI type companies in every field, in every industry, and trying to apply it. And that's a lottery. That's a tough business. And the one thing I would say there that maybe is a little bit more of a downer in a way is that technology over time tends to advantage bigger companies.
Mm-hmm.
Software and data have extremely high economies of scale. So they get leveraged across big companies better than small ones. And when you look at data, the big companies have more data. And so in that sense, and you look at the history of how, malls sort of wiped out small shops on Main Street, and the internet wiped out the malls, and now you have giant online retailers. And I think there's some truth to that in a lot of existing areas. So the entrepreneurs sort of have to find areas that are not in the sort of steamroller path of large, automated firm, the Amazons of the world. But fortunately, that seems to happen. I mean, I look around the Boston area where I live, and there's small companies starting up to do local things all over the place. And it hasn't led to the end of small business, but it sure is, it's pushed them out of some of the traditional areas.
So you mentioned you mentioned the programming and the AI business basically.
Yeah.
AI can already start actually do some of the basic programming, right? So
Sure.
do you see that becoming available? So for example, the small business owner, it used to be, I mean, you think about it, when in the 90s, to build a website, you had to hire a professional and pay him $15,000 or $20,000, right?
Yeah.
Now you get online and you do it in about 15 minutes, right?
Yeah. So, then you start doing complicated things and you still wind up hiring someone.
Yeah, I get that. But my point is that it actually has made it easier. It's made it easier to start a business,
Sure.
Right? So the internet's by far made it easier. There's many fewer barriers to entry because of technology. Do you see programming tools such that the small business owner then will be able to do effectively their own programming? And if that's the case, then maybe that's the solution to blockchain, because maybe the AI can actually program the blockchain. You can actually get that benefit.
Yeah, I think that's where things are heading, and so-called conversational programming, where you just tell the system what you want it to do and it figures out how to do it. There's a lot of people working on that, and I would bet that they'll get there at some point, probably not that far in the future. And you look at small businesses, people used to use 35 millimeter slides and overhead transparencies and pencils and papers and all these things that got replaced by software, PowerPoint and Excel and all these things. And it's really the same thing, just even better. And so I still look at the example of just the cloud computing, of what you can do for, $20 a month with Amazon versus the stuff you used to have to do by yourself that was just prohibitive. So it definitely creates, as you say, it just reduces the barriers of entry tremendously.
I love it. So the book is Technology Fears and Scapegoats. Our guest has been David Moschella. David, where can we go to get more information about you and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I work for an organization called ITIF.org, the Information Technology Innovation Foundation, and a lot of my stuff's there. But if you just go to Amazon, look at the book, it'll have links to other stuff, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well, and there'll be tons of stuff there. And the one thing I'll say on the book, we talk about AI today, but AI is one of 40 some odd topics that it looks at, and it tries to make people feel better about misinformation and polarization and job losses and all the fears that are out there today. It tries to just give you a positive spin on what technology has done and what we think it will do.
I love it. Obviously, technology we can't stop it. It's here to stay, and it's here and we can use it to our benefit. To me, I look at the entrepreneur, I'm going, the great thing about entrepreneurs is every entrepreneur I know is creative. They're all looking at, how do I solve more problems faster at a lower cost? And that's pretty much the job of the entrepreneur. And AI and other technologies to do this, we just need to get the education, understand how to use them, get resources for them. When we do that, as always, we're always going to make way more money and pay way less tax. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, David.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.